So it's time for our next session and for our last panel, Redefining Urban Spaces, Building Safe and Smart Cities. I think that's a space that cuts across all the areas we have been discussing since morning, education, home, workplace, because anything we need to do, anything we need to access, we need safe spaces pretty much for everything. So let's hear about it from our experts on this topic. And for this, I would like to call the chair and the moderator of the session, Sarika Chakravarti, who has nearly 2 decades of cross-sectoral experience in urban, transportation, and environmental planning domains. Currently, she's working as the team lead of the Jeff 7-funded Urban Shift Country project at the National Institute of Urban Affairs, widely regarded as a think tank for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. Sarika, a very warm welcome to you, and over to you to invite our other panelists and take it over.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everyone. It's very heartening to see a house full. I was thinking that this is an evening session, so I will perhaps not have this much of an audience. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Sarika. Very interesting session. I am to moderate today, Redefining Urban Spaces, Building Safe and Smart Cities. Let me start by just saying that urbanization is a continued process, and it is very significant, and it's also very complex. And as more and more people move into our cities, I think the data is that today 56% of our population stays in cities. And this is bound to be, as high as 70% by 2050. And it is critical to ensure that urban areas that we are living in, that they grow, develop, and expand in a way that is equitable, sustainable, and inclusive. So why cities are important is also because 80% of our GDP is produced from cities. And that's why they become extremely important. And that is why it's also important that we see and we manage how they're growing, because those are our homes actually. The speed of urbanization also brings with itself its own set of challenges. And those challenges being that, firstly, there's a demand for affordable housing, which most of our formal housing supply mechanisms, they are unable to meet. The second is that there needs to be viable infrastructure in terms of transport, in terms of basic urban services. And particularly, what's important is that our cities need to generate jobs. And there are 1 billion urban poor. So there needs to be a lot of focus on the informal jobs and informal sectors. Another important aspect of urbanization is the urban sprawl that is often talked of. Demand for urban land, this is a very interesting statistics, that demand for urban land outpaces population by as much as 50%. So the population growth is, like the land expansion is twice as that of the population growth. This is particularly important in terms of cities, like the metropolitan areas, and here I would like to quote an example of Delhi. Incidentally, I would also like to mention that I was part of the team that was responsible for preparing the Delhi Master Plan 2041, wherein we were supporting the Delhi Development Authority as technical advisors. So from an extensive baseline that we did for almost 1.5 years, what emerged that 45% of the built-up area within Delhi is unplanned, and it accommodates 60% of the population. So 45% of the city is unplanned. It consists of slums, unauthorized colonies, and it accommodates 60%. So you can imagine the densities that reside within these unplanned settlements. And the city is also plagued with inequitable distribution of civic amenities and green open spaces. So it's imperative that our urban areas are expanded or they grow in a way that are equitable. So there are 2 questions that emerge from this. One is, are we providing enough? And second is, what are we providing? What we are providing, is it accessible by the vulnerable group? So how cities are planned is that mostly we have the system of preparing development plans, also called as, city development plans or master plans. The name varies, but ideally it is a vision that we, create for a city for it to grow over the next 20 years. And what dictates these plans is a set of development control regulations, bylaws, etc. And also there is a set of norms that for every, say, 10,000 population, there'll be one community open space or a park, things like that. So sometimes what happens, the city ticks the box of providing things in terms of numbers. But when you look at the spatial distribution of these green open spaces or these civic amenities, then you find that they're concentrated in a certain part of the city and they're not equitably distributed. So those numbers are not the true reflection of whether the city is equitable or it's not. The second is that even if we have these open spaces, these parks, schools, civic amenities, the vulnerable population, okay, this could be, the elderly, the women, the children, it could be people who are, let's say, differently abled, are they being able to access these services? So, and this becomes also more important from the gender sensitivity part of it, because 50% of our population is women. There are many initiatives over the past few years that have addressed gender equities in India and globally. I'm very happy that there are such kind of conferences where we started talking about gender equity, and it has become more more obvious in the past few years, particularly. There are transport systems that are more responsive. There are initiatives to address sexual harassment that have been developed. I heard someone speak about POSH. And cities are designing more inclusive public spaces and infrastructure. And in a few countries, there is a recognition that care work needs to be factored in while planning and designing infrastructure and services. However, we all realize and recognize the fact that a lot more needs to be done. On this note, I would like to invite our panelists that are here. We have a very distinguished group of eminent experts here. Mr. Christian Eschley, he's from Head Asia Pacific from Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Am I? Okay, excuse me for that. Let's just call it CAS. So, Christian, please come and take your seat. He's the director of the Foundation's Political Dialogue Asia program. He joined the foundation in 2007 as an online editor, and his work focuses on the influence of social media on social and political opinion making, digital transformation, and cooperation with political parties. Welcome, Christian. Our next speaker is Ms. Mithali Nikore, founder Nikore Associates. Mithali is a pioneering economist with 12 years of experience in gender mainstreaming, development finance, policy advisory, and social entrepreneurship. She's also, she still is a World Bank consultant and a lead author of World Bank's flagship publication, a toolkit on enhancing gender-responsive urban mobility, public spaces in India. Our third panelist is Mr. Imani Kumar. Mr. Kumar is the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability and Executive Director, ICLEI South Asia. Myself and Mr. Kumar have had the opportunity to work together under this Urban Shift project by which I was introduced. With more than 25 years of experience, Mr. Kumar has intensively worked on issues related to climate change policy, planning, local governance, renewable energy, energy efficiency, social accountability, systems management, and auditing. Welcome, sir. So we have a lot to hear from you people and your experiences so far. Christian, I would like to start with you. Can you share your vision of a gender-inclusive city? What does it exactly mean? And from your experience, can you quote some examples to help our audience understand what is possible and what needs to be done?
Thank you so much, Sarika. And yeah, thank you to all of you for being here. As Sarika said, it's the late afternoon panel, and it's wonderful to see how many engaged participants and how many good discussions we had throughout the day. So I think we're giving our best to give it a good rep with this panel. Now, on your question, I was based in Singapore for 5 years, from 2017 to 2022. And as the head of the Political Dialogue Asia of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, I learned a lot about how to strengthen women in the region. Konrad Adenauer Foundation tried to do its bit with a network for female parliamentarians in the region, or a network for young female politicians. But I would like to point out one of the experiences that I had that was maybe the most interesting and probably also the most effective one when it comes to redefining urban spaces. And this is from Malaysia. There's a small island in the northwest of Malaysia, which is called Penang. And in Penang, there was a pilot project between 2012 and 2019, which is called Gender Responsive and Participatory Budgeting. So I'm happy that I have two experts with me who will talk about how to shape the cities, but I will talk about where the money for this should be coming from. And I think gender-sensitive budgeting is very important in this context. So in Malaysia, they said, "Our money, our say." This was kind of the slogan that was connected to this budget. And the idea was to have $60,000 US every year for this particular gender-sensitive or gender-responsive budget. And the interesting part that I would like to share just now is how they did it and what kind of success they had with it. So the first very important part was to do a proper analysis of how the budget is set up right now, and to involve women from all walks of life in Penang into the consultation process. So they were making very sure that this is a bottom-up process. They were asking for women from very challenged backgrounds to come into workshops, into discussion groups, to find out from them what they need, how the city, how the village needs to be respaced in order to fit their needs. And based on this, they started to develop certain projects, and I will give a few examples in a moment. And then in the third step, they went for a vote, for an election. So all the women in the village or the city were invited to elect which has the highest priority for them. So a very democratic, very bottom-up approach in order to identify the projects that should be financed by this $60,000 US every year. And then they went into implementing these projects. And one example, and I think we talked a little bit about parks already, you did just now. So one example was, of course, to upgrade the recreational park in a city. But it was very important that the women who decided about this were also involved in the planning. So it was not just the city administration that then went ahead and say, let's have a nice park with lots of gym accessoires. But it was the women who said, no, we don't need gym accessoires, we need something else, to make this work for us. What they also did in their analysis, going through the budget, was to look at where the budget is actually ending up. So one example was a public pool, which was visited by 70% men and 30% women. So they said, if we are spending $10,000 US on this budget every year, this means that $7,000 US are going to men and 3,000 are going to women. So we have to find other parts of this budget to balance this out. And I think this was a very interesting and good approach to look at how local budgets are shaped. And so what they found out in this pilot process of 7 years was that it improved significantly the bridge between the community and the local administration. As I said, the women were involved in a lot of the planning around this budget. It was their own ability to express the priorities that are important for them. It was also about the strategic needs of the women, and of course it was about the empowerment of these women. So after the 7 years, Penang decided to translate this into a gender inclusiveness policy in 2019, which now takes this process in a permanent process. So as I said, I think it's a very interesting pilot project and worth to look up a little bit closer to see how women from all walks of life can be included in urban planning on a very small scale level and without too much of a cost. There was an agency that was created for this. It's the Penang Women's Development Corporation, if you want to look it up. And with that, the whole process went very smoothly. There was another example that I wanted to give, and I'm already hitting my 5 minutes, but the good message is that I will reduce it. I wanted to talk about the transport system, the public system in Japan, the women cars there, but I just learned from my colleague from Japan that it's not working so well, and India is doing much better, so no need to give this example here on the stage. But nonetheless, just to briefly mention why I wanted to talk about it, Japanese pupils, especially female pupils who are going through an exam phase, are an extremely vulnerable group because they are sitting in these overcrowded cars, being totally exhausted, and so they are obviously seen as easy targets by men. So there was a very high rate of sexual harassment cases, especially in 2005. This is when this whole process started. So just to say that it was very broadly implemented in Japan. Maybe Rabia later on can talk a little bit more about why it's working or why it's not working. But to think about these challenges, I think is also a very good example of what needs to be done. So I would leave it at that. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Christian. What I gathered from your deliverable is that we need to institutionalize gender planning in our cities. And it could be by forming organizations. They could be made part of a policy, and it could also be by devolution of funds specifically for gender planning and making our plans, our cities, etc. sensitive to that. I often wonder that why do we talk about gender and why do we talk about climate? Shouldn't all our policies and actions be gender friendly, and shouldn't all our actions be climate actions? What is the need of speaking about it, separately? But unfortunately, we are at a place where we have to. So this brings me to another question, and this is for Mr. Kumar. Sir, you've done a lot of work on inclusive urban spaces because you're also a planner, and I'm sure you worked a lot on the, this urban scale and the speciality of planning. So how important is it, this inclusive urban spaces for, an inclusive society, a gender-sensitive society, which is equitable for all?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarika, and I just want to thank Talent Economics and also CAS for giving me this opportunity. Frankly speaking, I came around 2 o'clock here, or 1:30 during the lunchtime, and I was just listening to last, 2 hours. And never I have attended these type of conferences because we are more into the technical issues, urban engineering solutions, planning solutions. And I think I did a mistake not attending any of these type of conferences previously, which I have. My wife tells me a lot of things. I help her. She works with Apollo Tires, and she's a gender expert, an IT and a gender expert. So she talks about all of these things. But as Sarika in her opening remarks, she said, urban planning, and if I have to talk about urban spaces, unfortunately, all our planning laws never talks about a gender-related. Nothing has been written there in that. Actually, frankly speaking, if I have to say that, it's nothing there. It's not there in your rules. Not there in your urban acts. It's not there. But I think in the previous session, not the round table, the previous session, the education one, which I'm hearing. Some of the optimistic people sitting on the stage saying that yes, things are happening on ground. And I just want to continue the same statements. Things are happening on ground, actually. Though it's very late when we talk about gender-specific or gender-responsive urban spaces, gender-responsive practices. I talk about waste management, maybe Mithali, she will talk about more on the transport, on the waste management process, on the transportation, on the buildings, on the open spaces, everything, like as Sarika is saying that, unfortunately, there is no link to the gender here on that. If I have to say that, I'm not quoting the government here, but if I have to put it on the previous last 6 years, you must have heard about the Smart Cities program of Government of India. Yes, all the 106 Smart City Challenge plans, what have been approved by the Government of India, I can say maybe around 40 to 50 of the projects, I have not gone through exact numbers, but 40 to 50% of the projects approved under the Smart Cities projects are linked to little bit. I'm not saying this straight away, it's a gender responsive project, but they have a link to the gender responsive, gender neutral, gender equity things in that actually. So that's one thing, that's why I'm saying that I'm also optimistic things are changing at that level, at the city level on that. I come from an organization called ICLEI, ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. We are a city association all over the world with 30 odd years. We are talking about climate change, we are talking about city development, we are talking about sustainable development. But if you say again in last 30 years, in last 3 decades, maybe around late 90s or early 20s, early 2000 is what the city started talking about gender responsive. And in India or in South Asia, I look after the South Asia, Asia Pacific region. It also came up very late, actually, maybe 2005 and 2006, people started talking about these things on that. Just to give you other example, as Christian has just said that, not only in Malaysia, Christian, very next our neighbor here, Nepal has a gender responsive budget. I don't know how many of you know Nepal, all the 300, I think 248 local governments have either a mayor or a deputy mayor is a woman mayor, actually. So that is a must when they have redefined their local government act on that. And in a similar way, what Christian has said that they have a gender responsive budget. And all those budgetary reforms, and if I'm not wrong, I was checking with my colleagues in Nepal, all these mayors are responsible for the financing department of the local government. So it's not just only giving a mayor or a deputy mayor post, but the finance department is with this lady, with this gender responsive person who is sitting in that position on that. And they have to ensure at least, you are talking about 25-30%, Christian, they have to ensure 60% of their budget needs to be spent on the gender responsive activities of that. If they don't do that, it won't be approved by the local council, and it won't pass, and it won't come into the onto the ground at all on that. So there is a gender responsive thing which is happening not only in other parts, but also in Nepal, and also in, I know that we have a new rule on the 33% reservation for women and all. But as Sarika is mentioning, why do we have that reservation? Why do we have to put it that and saying that this is what we need to have, but we can take it forward? That is something. The other activity, actually, we are helping. We were working very closely with all the Nepal. We are working with closely with 40 odd city governments in India. Another example I just want to give it is on one, we are working very closely with self-help groups in few cities, I can say maybe around 12 or 13 cities, where the city waste management plan is being run by these self-help groups. They will make sure that the segregation happens at household level. They give training program to all the ladies or all the male people, whoever is handling the waste at household level, collection of the waste, segregation of the waste, and transportation. And telling to the households, if you don't do it, in Udaipur, they have even pasted like a sticker outside their house saying that you are not responsible household, you are not responsible citizen. What is they call it in Hindi? I'm sorry, I'm a South Indian. Jimmedar Nagarik or whatever, the opposite to that actually. So you are not responsive if you don't do your waste segregation at home. And I'm telling you, once the self-help groups, the women groups came into picture, the system had changed completely in the city of Udaipur. A similar example happened in Coimbatore, I can tell you on that. So a lot of cities really, thanks to all the ladies who are working in the gender responsive thing on that. We also trained a lot of Anganwadis in these cities so that they can help in the city planning, so they can help in the city management of the services in that. And just one more example I will take, and I'll then stop here. The other thing which we are working also in Udaipur with support from Bernard Van Leen Foundation, BVLF, to create a healthy, safe and vibrant cities, especially for the babies and their caregivers. They have a program called Urban 95. The 95 is like a 95 centimeters of a child, 4 to 5 years of a child. And if you talk about a child, most of the times, I'm a father, I know that how many times I have taken my children to the park, but most of the caregivers are the ladies, or the women, or the grandparents, the adis, the nanas will take them. So when we looked into, in Udaipur city, thanks to this foundation, we have found out only 37% of the mothers are taking their children to these nearby parks and nearby urban spaces because they feel that it's not safe to take them outside. They are just sitting inside and taking care of their children on that. So we looked into some of these parameters. We helped the city governments now to come out with new policies to make sure more safe, more healthy to take them outside. I know that we also looked into the air pollution as there's a major concern, but not in Delhi or in NCR region. So this is another example which we looked into in that. And my last example to just give you is on the biodiversity plans which we are helping the city governments. There are more than, again, 30 odd city governments we are helping local biodiversity strategy action plan for the city governments. And I can tell you, the city of Kochi, when they made ward level, you know the municipal wards, ward level action plans, they have ensured that 50% of the women should participate in the action plan preparation. And then only that action plan for that particular ward about the biodiversity related activities there will be approved by the city government actually on that. So there is hope, I will say. I'm happy that I'm putting this on this state, on this stage and telling you that yes, things are changing on ground, but I'll say this is not sufficient. We should have done it maybe 10 years back, all these things. And yeah, if not that things are started happening, and I hope they will pick it up in a faster way and things will change in the future on that. The last point, when I joined this organization, this ICLI, I have at least 16 offices in the world, and 14 of them have female or the women employees. A majority of women employees and less of the male employees in that. I tried my best to do it here in this office in India. I'm sorry to say that I could not succeed it as yet, but I hope we have around 33 or 34% of employees as women employees now, but I hope I will make it more than 50 if I get a chance on that. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, and thank you for ending on an optimistic note. That yes, things are happening, but it is going to take time for the impact to show. Thank you for also, emphasizing on the fact that at the policy level, at the planning level, the implementation level, things need to change, and there needs to be more emphasis on inclusivity, particularly for the women. And Other thing also is that even from the, the point of the women being the users of the services that are being provided, that is also, for that also a certain kind of planning, a certain kind of sensitivity which is required. Often women, they are not able to access opportunities because there are not, particularly this happens because I can see, like we were a batch of 14 and there were, I think, around 12 girls in my class as when I was studying. I'm talking about Master's School of Planning and Architecture. And I think there are only 3 of us who are now actively working or are professionals, which is a very sad thing. And when you ask most of them, they're saying that there's a deficiency of caregiving services for their children, like there are no creches, not adequate creches. So most of these women, because they are the caregivers, because they are the mothers, wives, because of these, roles that have been, the gender roles that are assigned to women, they drop out of these things. So access to opportunities, that's really important. And when I talk about access to opportunities, that brings me to my next speaker, Mithali, who's a mobility expert. So Mithali, my question to you is, when I say access to opportunities, mobility plays a very, very strong role in that because, we need to undertake travel to reach our workplaces, to reach our places of education. And mostly when they are unsafe or when, the right kind of, systems are not planned, considering the needs of the women, women are not being able to access those opportunities, and as a result of that, they fall out of the main system. So can you please tell us more on this, speak about this, about how inclusive mobility is a part of gender building inclusive urban spaces?
So thanks a lot, Sarika. Firstly, I'd like to thank, Ipshita and Sanjay sir and everyone in Talentonomics and, of course, KAS. I'm not even going to attempt pronouncing the full name. And all the other organizers today. I think it's a phenomenal turnout and a phenomenal discussion. A lot of points have been made already, which have sparked a lot of thought. But I think I'd like to start at the beginning of every conversation in every meeting that I'm part of every day, which is India's labor force participation rate for women is falling. What should we do about it? And for me, this research started in 2019 when I was asked to write a book chapter on this topic of falling female labor force participation. And my team of 35 people, and all women, by the way, so maybe it's a bias thing, right? When you are a woman leader, you attract more women to work with you, possibly. And so we started with this data work, and we put a compendium together where we did the data work from 1950-51. And today we have the data till 22-23. And 2017-18 stands out, because it's the year in which India earned this tag of the fastest growing economy in the world. And it was the year in which the female labor force participation hit its lowest point since independence. Since 2017-18, like the golden hypothesis in feminist economics, the way we call it, there's been an increase in female labor force participation, but we've been tracking the data constantly, and we find that that is on account of unpaid jobs in household enterprises now being counted as part of the labor force participation. So having described this context of where we are, where only a third of our female population is even in the workforce, how do we actually make mobility an enabler for women to be able to access the education that they want, access the skill training that they want, access the job that they want, right? I don't want to be told, come back at 9 p.m. I don't want to be told, come back at 6 p.m. I don't want to be told, don't go to that place, but go to that place because there's no safe way to commute there. Or go with someone. Make sure that your male colleague, and this is happening in Gurgaon, by the way, in most offices, where they say, ask your male colleague to accompany you till the metro station, he'll drop you there, then you can go. I mean, what are we? Are we cattle? That, somebody needs to stand with us and walk with us and, take us to that last mile. This is absolutely unacceptable. So I think as a society, we have to now start absolutely rejecting these ideas that women should be the ones who should be told to come back at a certain time. And I will not name the government, but just yesterday there was a edict issued by one of the governments which said that skill training institutes should not provide classes to women beyond a certain time. And it's just shocking that we are in 2023 and we are still issuing such guidelines as a government. I mean, this is just wrong, right? And so I think from this point of view, when I was advising the World Bank, and I'm still advising them on certain topics, this toolkits idea came up from this sort of context. And as you described, there are a lot of small initiatives that cities have started taking, because they have also come to say that, we have to make our cities safe for women. We don't want to see, statistics of rapes and sexual harassment on streets being mentioned on the next day's newspaper. We have to make our cities safe. And that requires a very comprehensive, programmatic approach, where you start to understand the gender disaggregated mobility patterns, then strengthen the policies and institutions in your city, bring people like Sarika in charge, in charge of the transport and urban authorities, more and more women leaders, basically. And, the third is, of course, build capacity and raise awareness. I mean, why do we not have a major Bollywood star endorsing a women's safety campaign at a national level? I think we should do it. And maybe that will, increase the consciousness. And of course, the fourth is strengthen infrastructure. Like the infrastructure planning, like, sir pointed out just now, it's not taking into account the gender lens yet. But as everyone says, let's talk about the optimistic note. Our toolkit is out. So that's a first point of optimism that, we have the knowledge now as a sector, as an ecosystem, where we can start by referring to the World Bank's toolkit and, look at the various ideas, the 50 case studies that we've given in there, to draw on as a starting point. The second is we also have a shining example of a city that's doing it, and that city is Chennai. So in Chennai, we are supporting from the World Bank side a gender lab, which was set up in April 2022. Now this lab is basically 3 people who are extremely hardworking and doing the work of 15 people, because they happen to be all women, right? So of course, they are phenomenal. And they sit in the Greater Chennai Corporation, which for the Delhi audience is essentially equivalent to the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. And they advise on each and every project, especially the infrastructure projects. They have, some very standardized checklists now that, over time we've worked with them on developing, and they are also contained in our toolkit, which they can use to look at the design elements of, say, a metro station, a bus station, look at the intermodality between the services. Because the biggest problem when it comes to mobility is, okay, main ghar se nikal gayi, I've left my house. How do I go to the station safely? On a footpath that is not encumbered by, all the encroachments that we generally see. Or, I'm not harassed while walking to the station. In the vehicle, I could be harassed. While I'm boarding a bus, somebody could be feeling me up from behind, because the crowd is so much that we just never know who that person is. Even if you turn around, you can't say. And, we've done consultations with girls, especially school and college going girls, high school, and they find that they are the most photographed without their consent on the metro and in the buses across different cities. And if they ask a person, if they confront, say with 2-3 friends coming together and they confront, they will say, no, ma'am, maine to kuch nahi kiya, I was just checking my phone. So now in Chennai, we are seeing this programmatic approach where there is a citizen campaign, there are safety audits taking place, there is a perception survey about the city's safety that is taking place with all genders, including transgender persons. And also we are seeing a bystander campaign. So, Chennai is showing us the way, the toolkit is there, but what do we need to do going forward? There are 3 things I want to highlight. First is, I think, we are, of course, working with NIUA from the World Bank side, and this is to create awareness. We need more and more cities to become aware that there is a need to apply a gender lens when undertaking public transport system planning or city planning. The second is we have to build a political will around this, and this event, this conference is one of those, contributors to making that political will, because only by talking about this constantly can we, create this will amongst the leadership to say that, you need to do something about this. And then third, as, both Christian and Sir pointed out on gender responsive budgeting. Again, India has been a global leader, and I have published several papers on this. India is a global leader on gender responsive budgeting. India actually releases a gender responsive budgeting statement as part of the union budget. It's called Statement 13. Anyone can go on the budget website and download it, and it is phenomenally detailed. And my team has been analyzing the gender budget since the last, almost 5 years, and we've analyzed the gender budget from 2005 till now. And, every year we track what is the government of India's allocation. State governments are a different, issue, because most state governments don't have the capacity yet to go for it. But UN Women, ADB, they are working very hard on, enhancing the capacity. I've supported them also previously on it. And Tamil Nadu has now become, earlier it was Kerala, which was the leader on gender responsive budgeting, but Tamil Nadu has now emerged as a very strong leader on gender responsive budgeting, and the Gender Lab is benefiting from it. Because now that, they are so transparent with their resource allocation, the Gender Lab can actually go and petition for funds, especially under the Nirbhaya program. So, with these developments, what we need to create is more political will for a renewal of the Nirbhaya program. We need to see a bigger, better Nirbhaya program in the, coming years. And we really need to create leadership of women, at the city level, at the state level, who can just take these funds and then deploy them. Because it's not only about having funds, but also how do we deploy, having that gender action plan. And I think I'll end with last point is that going forward in Chennai, we are supporting gender action planning in two very important areas. One is the comprehensive mobility plan that the city, Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority is putting together. And the second is a gender action plan for the master planning of central, Chennai metropolitan area, like you said about Delhi initially. And if we can really do well on these two gender action plans with good key monitorable indicators which are gender disaggregated, it can be a model for the rest of the country. So we are hoping that in the next year, 2024, will be the year in which these two come out.
Thanks, Mithali. And a lot of things that all of us learned here, particularly about the union budget, having a component of, gender planning. They've allotted a budget for that. So that was very insightful. Just wanted to add that I had read somewhere that perhaps the number is not as, may not be accurate, but there is an economic value also assigned to the home work, the household work that a woman does, close to around 40,000 per month, So these are some interesting things that are happening. Things are moving. But, I think where we stand in India is that we do have some systems and checks and balances in place. But whether they are, achieving what is expected out of them, that is something that is still questionable. Just last night in the news, I was hearing that there is some state which is giving out mobile phones to women, as a way of empowering them. And when these women were asked, where are your mobile phones, a couple of months down the line, they said, my grandson, my husband, my son, my, all of them, they've taken this phone. So they are no longer in possession of those phones. So while, yes, there is a policy that you give them a phone and, digital penetration will increase and things like that. But whether it's actually working or not, that's, still we need miles to go on that. Christian, coming back to you again, we would like to hear from you that how can international collaborations, foster gender equitable urban policies? One of the ways, of course, is that we see what other countries are doing and contextually try to adopt them. But could you add more on that based on your experiences?
Thank you, with pleasure. So I would like to go back to the experiences that I...
And yes, slightly brief, okay?
Brief, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going very quickly back to the experiences that I collected during my time here in Singapore. So we had this network of Asian women parliamentarians, and I have to say that one of the most intense sessions that we had, one of the most intense conferences, was when the female parliamentarians met representatives of civil society organizations that were pushing agenda which is focusing on female issues. And I was expecting that this would be a very easy conference, you know, and everybody would be holding hands and going forward together. But you're laughing already. This was not the case. It was a rather emotional and dramatic conference. And it was very visible, the gap between the politicians, especially visible, I would say, for some of the Asian countries that were represented, and the representatives of the civil society hardly ever talked to each other. And so this is not a big new idea, but I think talking to each other on all levels, and not doing only the parliamentarian caucus, but also bringing them in touch or in contact with the civil society. This is something that is really so important, and this goes for like visits, conferences, but it of course also goes for the experience to travel into a country, to go into a country. I very much like that at one of the roundtables we heard about the paternal leave that is now becoming more visible in India. I studied in Sweden in 2004, and I was completely enthusiastic about the idea of parental leave, which was by then established in Sweden, but not in Germany. So 5 to 10 years later, this started in Germany. Parental leave became a part of a necessity in order to get your full parental leave. In order to get the full leave, it's 14 months, but you only get it if the father or the other partner also takes at least 2 months. And this was such a breakthrough for Germany. So we had it in Sweden, in Scandinavia at the early 2000s. We had it in Germany in the early 2010s. And we obviously now have it in India in the early 2020s. So it takes time, but I can tell you that the effect is incredible. And so to, you know, do this, go to other places, understand about what's happening there, I think this is also a very important part of the answer.
So legacy-wise, I mean, India actually has a lot of strong women. And if you go to the rural areas, you will find that a lot of households are women-headed, you know. So I think we just need to, like they say, even in transport, etc., go back to the roots kind of a thing. It's just that we need to, and we really need to diminish this line which defines the gender roles also. That's also equally important, you know. I'm just bringing this out of context, but, you know, whenever I'm very tired after a very long day at office, my husband tells me, oh, let me come and help you in the kitchen. You're not helping me. It's not my job to do, you know. So while I mean, I appreciate the fact that he like stands up and he wants to help me, but the word help itself, you know, that defines that this is your job and I'm helping you do it, you know, that kind of a thing. So anyway, yeah. So I have a lot of questions for the other panelists as well, but I love to talk and I think we're running out of time here. So Imani sir, just quickly about how gender equitable urban spaces can lead to a more productive and happy cities. Just a couple of sentences.
Audience want to have some questions, okay.
We can't miss out on that. Just quickly, if you could do that.
Sorry, what do you say?
About gender equitable urban spaces.
See, the thing is, I think what Christian is saying, and we have the policies, we have to maybe strengthen further and to implement on ground, because India has one of the best policies in the world, whichever one you take it up. But when it comes to implementation, I think that's where we are lacking. Maybe we need to strengthen that particular part. You know that a lot of, as part of the 73rd, 74th Amendment Bill and various state governments, including the Madhya Pradesh, if you talk about, like, women has, like, at the sarpanch level, at the council level, you have the women reservation is already implemented on ground. But their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, they will come and rule this thing only for the sake of electing the woman ward member or a woman sarpanch. They are there in front. but all the other things, Sarpanchpati or whatever they call it, like at various places on that. So I think that's one thing we need to look into. How do we make it further happen on ground, not just giving them, keeping them on that. The second point I just want to add, and I'll close here, is also on the, what I already said, I think, what the example she has given, putting a gender lens for all the infrastructure projects in India. I think that is one thing lacking. I hope we will ensure that happens on ground. See that particular thing. I'm not saying that it is not happening completely, but I think we need to put more clear lens there to take it forward on that. And I think the data is I think that is where it clearly helped in Chennai planning, or in Bangalore, or here in Hyderabad. I think that we need to analyze those data and take it forward when we do the planning on that. Thank you.
Mithali, quickly comment on the gender responsive urban mobility initiatives, please. Quickly.
So I'll actually bring just one line, which is on the intersection of care economy and mobility solutions. So in Mumbai, we are already starting to see that the Mumbai Corporation, the BMC, is very interested in introducing mobile creches at metro stations, because they feel that they have the land, metro stations have the space, and there is of course a demand for creches which are close. The other idea that is coming up, when it comes to mobility systems and care work, is about time poverty, right? That you're wasting time when you don't have a service available. And this is where intermodality and gender disaggregated data become important. So if as a network planner, say I am a bus transport corporation, if I know that these are the routes on which women are regularly taking, commuting, and this is the time at which they commute the most, we often call 5 p.m. the peak time. Why? Because men are commuting at that time. But 3 p.m. is the peak time for women. So it's important for us to now start defining these peak times, make more services available at these times, and also link it up with the locations where women have to commute for mobility of care. Whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, whether it's care centers, care facilities. So I think by linking mobility with the needs of the women, and by bringing in care into every system, we can actually bridge the gap, gender gap in unpaid work as well. Which in India, by the way, I just want to end with one statistic. Women do 5.6 hours of one unpaid work every day. Please guess the number for men, but it's less than 1 hour. It's actually 30 minutes. So when your husband says he's helping, if he's doing more than 30 minutes, he's already higher than the average Indian male.
Good, that's some consolation. Okay, over to the house, please. Yes, you are.
Hello, all right. I guess I've been waiting for this session. All right. So my name is Karan Saudagar, and I'm a founder of a women-centric brand called Bold and Beautiful. It's a women-driven cab services for women. So before I ask my question to Mithali and Christian, I'll give you a little backstory. Yesterday I was invited to a webinar which was held, this was a virtual one in Muscat. So there's a company called O Taxi. They are completely women-driven cabs for women. And knowing Muscat, which they never had a policy or a law, they got it approved. Although it took them almost 3 years, but they made it happen. And so it's been almost 4 months we are in operations. My question to Mithali is, do you think it's possible in India? And do you think it's important? And so to your question, India is still not there when I would say, from a women community, or the community which has been dominated by male, we still have a scope and opportunity where, likely you said, that women need to be felt safe while traveling. We still haven't thought about it. We reached out to a lot of people and investors. They said, this is a stupid idea. So still we have a lot of scope, and I would open this question to both of you. One, do you think it's possible? What a World Bank or a government is doing? And do you think there can be something can be done to make sure this doesn't die, or probably there is more of awareness around this.
Can we take some other questions so that they all can answer in one go? Yes, please.
Yeah, so I'm very delighted that this session has happened, because obviously urbanization is perhaps the most critical issue, or in terms of growth and safe urban spaces. Again, you need to make that happen, otherwise urbanization is going to be incomplete and it won't contribute as much. So I want to get to one micro issue Mitali already pointed to, which was childcare, which I believe is perhaps the most critical issue when it comes to female labor force participation. We talked about it yesterday. But the other one I want to talk about is toilets, right? So, our daughter taught in a school, in Teach for India school in Mumbai for 2 years. And she used to carry her water bottle with her and sip on it the whole day for about 8 hours during the teaching cycle. And she wouldn't use the toilet in a proper urban school in Dharavi, in Mumbai, right? So this whole thing, toilets, surely, I mean, it is not rocket science, right? Yes, governments build the toilets, but they don't put water, there's no maintenance, there's no water. But surely I've been hearing for years now technology, that waterless toilets, technology I've been hearing about ad nauseum. And I'm just interested in understanding why this apparently simple problem cannot get cracked, right? So we know, toilets are a huge problem. In women in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, their window of going shopping is 2 hours and no more, right? Because especially the poorer women, richer ones can, go to some hotel or something and access the facilities there, but the poorer women. So what is the problem in putting safe, usable, clean toilets out there, which can make a massive difference to mobility and participation?
I think Imani sir can take that question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I think my one point was the toilet. The other thing is, when we're looking at safe, smart cities, are we also considering there have to be areas where women can have fun? It could be parks, it could be sports facilities, it could be anywhere where they would like to hang out. And are we supposed to have people who are marshals, or are we building that in when we're looking at smart cities? Because, when we open recreation as safe spaces, I think a lot of other things get taken care of. So that's another thing. And also a question, which are the typical infrastructure, you talked about infrastructure, which are the pillars? So toilets, mobility, schools, probably infrastructure for school, which is closer to these. What else can we look at as pillars?
So Christian, more questions? Yeah, let's just answer that. Yeah. We could perhaps interact later on and answer. Christian, over to you.
Very quickly, I want to go for a touchy topic that we haven't discussed a lot here, but that was a learning that I had while I lived in Singapore. So police and fines and the judicial system can also play a role in making women's life more secure. And I believe that there's a lack in most of the countries outside of Singapore. But when you ask yourself, why is it possible for women to walk at midnight through Singapore and be very sure that they will not be harassed, it's also about the fact that everybody trusts that there is a judicial system in place, police is in place, the rules are in place. So to find a way to reform the police body, find a way to make sure that the judicial processes around sexual harassment and worse are in place. I think this is also a part of the answer, how to move this forward. Apart from that, I do also believe in Germany we gain more and more experiences with quota. It's not the only answer, but it can be part of the answer. If we are looking at international exposure, how to make sure that enough students, enough pupils are traveling abroad. I think sometimes it also just have to be a quota in place to make this work. So that's my very brief.
Thank you. Mitali?
So first of all, coming to bold and beautiful, Sakha Consulting is already, Azad Foundation has a very, very strong service, which is also available at Terminal 3. And I think that, the market for shared and individual IPT, basically, taxi services is growing. as long as it's not restricted to women customers. Because obviously it's not that you should only have women driving women. You know, if you leave that mindset and if we can have women driving anyone, then we are changing the mindset from the word go. Because a lot of people even today make jokes on women drivers. And the fact that, you know, you would have a women-driven cab service, which can of course make women feel safe, but is also a cab service of choice for all passengers, can make sure you have the, you know, the market share. Of course, we can talk more later on that. On your investors' point, I wonder how many investors you met were women. Because if they were all men, then of course they'll say that this is not an issue because they are not experiencing it. And then I think quickly, sir, on the toilets point, I just want to highlight a very quick anecdote. In the safety audit that we did for Chennai, they actually found a toilet in the middle of the city where goats were tied outside the toilet and the toilet was locked, a woman's toilet. And everybody in that settlement was asked, like, ye to women, there's a toilet for women, like, why have you kept it locked? They're like, ma'am, women are very hesitant to use this toilet, but we needed a place for the goats, so we started using this women's toilet. So now in a country where even the community is valuing a place to park goats over a woman's toilet, we can understand why it's not being given that priority which it deserves. So somewhere I think even as a community we have to work and demand that, you know, we want to have functioning safe toilets. Lastly, on the pillars, you know, you asked about what are the different pillars which actually form a safe city. I think one way of looking at it is the way you did, that, you know, okay, different parts should be safe, be it educational institutions, schools, you know, healthcare centers, elderly care facilities, hospitals, all of these need to be safe, workplaces. Any building I go to, metro should be safe, the station should be safe, the bus, you know, should be safe, the bus station should be safe. The other way is to look at the elements of safety, right? We need to avoid dark spots everywhere. We need to have lighting. We need to have visibility. We need to have a feeling of safety through eyes on the street. You know, like your street vendors are always going to be there. Can we have more women street vendors? Can we have designated spaces on the footpath, you know, for street vendors on one side and then enough space to walk as well? So, you know, with these elements of safety also, we can increase safety and inclusion.
Okay, the time's up, but Imani,
just
yeah.
last point, under the smart cities, few cities, I'm not saying all the 109 smart cities have come out with, there is an app now for toilets, so we can, few cities it's still working, few cities didn't work. And the other thing is, any toilet now in any hotel or any office is open for anybody, especially for women can go. It's now, you have to, I'm saying sorry against all the ladies, you have to go and ask for it, like, and they cannot deny it. They cannot say no to use those toilets on that. So that's there now in most of the cities, and you can, there are apps also which you can see that where the nearest toilet is available. As part of the smart cities, they have done all these things also. Thank you.
Okay, just to conclude, we had some, thank you for the insights provided, all three of you. We talked about gender-responsive budgeting and participatory planning. Just a point to add here, while we're talking about participatory planning, we also have to think about building the participatory competence. Okay, that's a very, very important thing, because otherwise it's just for the sake of, you know, participation. The second is about bottoms-up approach, and the third is institutionalizing gender planning. We also need a very robust data framework, you know, so that we know that our decisions are evidence-backed. We need to build gender sensitivity. You know, it should be a fundamental to all, you know, our actions and our decisions and our planning. We also need to build political will around it, like Mithali very rightly put. And like I said, that there is a line which defines the gender roles in our society, and that really needs to diminish. I really hope sincerely that the conversation we had today, you know, would play a small role in kind of transforming our cities from just cities to caring cities. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.